The gunshot echoed through the timber forest, and Delilah Preston froze mid-step, her hand gripping the worn leather reins of her father's old mule as her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had been walking these mountain trails for 3 weeks now, making her way from Sacramento to the mining camp near Coloma, California, where her uncle had promised her work cooking for the miners in the spring of 1867. The war had ended 2 years ago, leaving the country scarred and restless, and Delilah herself had lost everything when her parents succumbed to fever the previous winter. At 22 years old, she found herself alone in the world with nothing but a few belongings tied to an aging mule and the address of an uncle she had not seen since childhood. The second gunshot made her drop to her knees behind a fallen pine, her breath coming in short gasps. Through the trees ahead, she could hear men shouting, their voices rough and angry. She pressed herself against the damp earth, praying they would not notice her. "You think you can steal from us and walk away?" a voice bellowed. Another voice responded, deeper and calmer, though she could not make out the words. Then came the unmistakable sound of fists hitting flesh, grunts of pain, and more shouting. Delilah knew she should stay hidden, should wait until the violence passed and the men moved on. But the mule had other ideas. The stubborn creature let out a loud bray that seemed to echo through the entire forest. The shouting stopped. Footsteps crashed through the underbrush toward her. "Well, what do we have here?" Delilah looked up to find 3 men standing over her. They were dirty and unkempt, their clothes stained with what looked like old blood and their eyes holding the kind of cruelty that made her stomach turn. The one who had spoken was missing several teeth, and his smile made her skin crawl. "Please," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am just passing through. I do not want any trouble." "Hear that, boys? She does not want any trouble." The man laughed, and his companions joined in. "That is real considerate of you, miss. But see, you just witnessed something you should not have. Cannot have you running off to tell the law, now can we?" One of the other men reached for her, and Delilah scrambled backward, her hands searching the ground for anything she could use as a weapon. Her fingers closed around a rock, but before she could lift it, a voice cut through the air like a blade. "Step away from her." The 3 men spun around, and Delilah saw him for the first time. He stood between 2 massive pines, tall enough that he seemed to fill the space between them. His shoulders were broad, his chest thick with muscle beneath a leather vest that had seen better days. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, tangled and wild, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that held her attention, pale blue and hard as winter ice, fixed on the 3 men with an intensity that made her shiver. "This is not your business, mountain man," the leader said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "I am making it my business." The stranger's voice was low and even, but there was something in it that promised violence. "The lady asked to be left alone. You are going to honor that request." The leader laughed, but it sounded forced. 3 against 1. "You sure you want to do this?" The mountain man did not respond with words. He moved with startling speed for someone so large, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides. His fist connected with the leader's jaw with a crack that made Delilah wince. The man crumpled to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. The other 2 rushed him at once. Delilah watched in stunned silence as the mountain man fought them both, his movements economical and brutal. He blocked a punch from one, drove his elbow into the other's stomach, then brought his knee up into the first man's face. Within moments, all 3 attackers were on the ground, groaning or unconscious. The mountain man stood over them, breathing hard but not winded, his knuckles bleeding. Then he turned to Delilah, and those ice-blue eyes softened slightly. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, still unable to find her voice. He was even more imposing up close, easily over 6 feet tall with arms thick as tree branches and a chest that strained against his shirt. His face was weathered and scarred, but there was something in his expression that was not unkind. "Can you stand?" he asked. Delilah nodded and pushed herself to her feet, brushing dirt from her worn dress. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along." "I know what would have happened," he said grimly. "These men are part of a gang that has been terrorizing prospectors in these mountains. They were robbing a miner when I came across them." He gestured back toward the trees. "He is dead. They shot him when he tried to fight back." Delilah felt her stomach turn. "Should we not report this to the law? The nearest law is 2 days' ride from here. By the time anyone came back, these men would be long gone." He looked at the 3 unconscious forms and seemed to make a decision. "I will tie them up and leave them with a note explaining what they did. Someone will find them eventually. Right now, my concern is getting you somewhere safe. Where were you headed?" "Coloma. My uncle runs a boarding house there for miners. He offered me work." The mountain man nodded. "I know the place. That is a full day's walk from here, and the sun will be setting soon. You should not be traveling these trails alone, especially not after what just happened. I have a cabin about an hour north of here. You can stay there tonight, and I will take you to Coloma in the morning." Every instinct Delilah possessed told her she should be wary of this stranger, no matter how heroically he had just acted. But something in his eyes, in the way he kept a respectful distance even as he offered help, made her trust him. "I do not even know your name," she said. "Yates Langford," he replied. "And you are Delilah Preston." He nodded as if committing it to memory. "Well, Miss Preston, we should get moving before these men wake up. Bring your mule." Yates made quick work of tying up the 3 gang members using rope from his own pack. He left them propped against trees with a note pinned to the leader's chest explaining their crimes. Then he led Delilah through the forest, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every tree and rock. His cabin appeared as the sun began to sink behind the mountains, casting long shadows through the pines. It was small but well built, constructed from thick logs with a stone chimney rising from one end. A small corral held a massive black horse that nickered in greeting as they approached. "It is not much," Yates said, "but it is warm and dry." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly tidy. A large bed occupied one corner, covered with furs and thick blankets. A wooden table and 2 chairs sat near the fireplace, and shelves lined the walls, holding supplies and tools. Everything had its place, everything was organized and clean. "You can have the bed," Yates said, already moving to build a fire. "I will sleep on the floor." "I cannot take your bed," Delilah protested. "You can and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "I have slept on harder surfaces than a wood floor, Miss Preston. Make yourself comfortable." As he worked on the fire, Delilah found herself studying him. His hands were large and scarred, the hands of a man who worked hard for his living. The muscles in his back and shoulders moved beneath his shirt as he stacked wood and struck flint. There was a grace to his movements despite his size, an economy of motion that spoke of years spent in the wilderness. "How long have you lived out here?" she asked. 5 years, he replied, not turning around. "I came west after the war looking for peace and quiet, found it up here in these mountains. You fought in the war, Union Army, saw more death and destruction than any man should have to see." He got the fire going and stood, brushing off his hands. "When it ended, I could not go back to civilization. Too loud, too crowded, too many memories, so I came here. Do you not get lonely?" Yates looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment something flickered in those ice-blue eyes. "Sometimes," he admitted, but lonely is better than what I left behind. He moved to a cupboard and began pulling out supplies. I do not have much in the way of fancy food, but I can make a decent stew. Are you hungry? Delilah realized she was ravenous. Starving, actually. As Yates cooked, Delilah found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. There was something comforting about the cabin, about the simple domesticity of watching this large, capable man prepare a meal. He moved around the small space with ease, chopping vegetables and meat, adding them to a pot that hung over the fire. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Preston," he said as he worked. "What brings you to these mountains alone?" So Delilah told him. About her parents dying, about having nowhere else to go, about the uncle who had written to offer her a position. As she spoke, Yates listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. "That is a hard thing, losing your family," he said when she finished. "I lost mine too, though in a different way. My parents disowned me when I joined the Union Army. They were Southern sympathizers, could not abide having a son who fought for the North, have not spoken to them since." "I am sorry," Delilah said softly. "Do not be. They made their choice, I made mine. No point dwelling on it." He ladled stew into 2 bowls and brought them to the table. "Eat up. You need your strength for tomorrow's journey." The stew was simple but delicious, rich and hearty, and Delilah ate every bite. As they finished their meal, the sun disappeared completely, leaving only the firelight to illuminate the cabin. Yates cleaned up the dishes while Delilah sat by the fire, feeling the exhaustion of the day settling into her bones. "You should get some sleep," Yates said. "We will leave at first light." Delilah moved to the bed, removing only her shoes before lying down atop the furs. They were incredibly soft, and the bed was more comfortable than anything she had slept on in weeks. She watched as Yates spread his own bedroll on the floor near the fire, his movements methodical and practiced. "Mr. Langford," she said into the darkness. "Yes, Miss Preston. Thank you." "For everything." There was a long pause before he responded. "You are welcome. Now get some sleep." Despite her exhaustion, Delilah found sleep elusive. Her mind kept replaying the events of the day. The terror of those men finding her, the violence of the fight, and most of all, the unexpected kindness of the mountain man who now lay between her and the door, a silent guardian. "Mr. Langford," she said again. "Are you awake?" "I am now." "I am sorry, I just cannot seem to fall asleep. My mind will not stop racing." She heard him sigh, then the sound of him sitting up. "Would it help to talk, perhaps? Tell me something about yourself. Something good, not about the war or your family, just something that makes you who you are." Yates was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then his voice came through the darkness, softer than before. "I like to dance," he said. Delilah sat up, surprised. "You dance?" "Used to. Before the war, I would go to every barn dance and social gathering in my county. My mother taught me when I was young, before everything went bad between us. She said a man should know how to dance, should know how to hold a woman properly and move with grace." He laughed, a sound without much humor. "Suppose that seems foolish for someone like me." "Not at all," Delilah said. "I think it is wonderful. What about you? Do you dance?" The question hit her like a physical blow, bringing with it a wave of old hurt she thought she had buried. "No," she said quietly, "I never learned." "Why not?" "Because no one ever asked me." The words came out more bitter than she intended. "When I was younger, I would go to the town socials, hoping someone would invite me to dance. But I was always too tall, too plain, too awkward. The boys would dance with the pretty girls, the delicate ones who giggled and knew how to flutter their eyelashes. I would stand against the wall all night, watching everyone else have fun. Eventually, I stopped going." "That is a shame," Yates said. "A real shame. It does not matter now." "I am too old to care about such things." "You are not old, And it does matter. Everyone should get to dance, Miss Preston. Everyone should know what that feels like." His words touched something deep inside her, something tender and long neglected. "Perhaps in another life," she said. "Perhaps in this one." Before she could ask what he meant, she heard him lie back down. "Try to get some sleep, Miss Preston. Tomorrow will be a long day." This time, when she closed her eyes, sleep came more easily. Delilah woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's single window, and Yates was already up, cooking breakfast over the fire. He had tied his long hair back, and in the morning light she could see him more clearly. His face was all hard angles and weathered skin, his nose slightly crooked as if it had been broken and healed wrong. But there was something compelling about him, a raw strength and competence that she found herself drawn to. "Morning," he said when he noticed her sitting up. "Breakfast is almost ready." They ate quickly, and Yates packed supplies for the journey while Delilah tidied herself as best she could. Within an hour they were on the trail, Yates leading the way with her mule following behind and his massive black horse bringing up the rear. The morning was cool and clear, the air filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. Yates pointed out landmarks as they walked, explaining the terrain with the ease of someone who knew it intimately. He showed her where a bear had marked its territory on a tree, where the best fishing streams were, which plants were safe to eat and which would make her sick. "You really love these mountains," Delilah observed. "I do," he admitted. "They are harsh but honest. They do not pretend to be something they are not. If you respect them, learn their ways, they will provide for you. But if you are foolish or careless, they will kill you without hesitation." That sounds rather bleak. It is reality. There is a purity to that, to living somewhere that demands you be strong and capable. Out here, you cannot hide behind social niceties or false pretenses. You are exactly who you are, nothing more and nothing less. Delilah thought about that as they walked. "Is that why you stayed?" "Because you could stop pretending." Yates glanced back at her, something like approval in his eyes. "You are perceptive, Miss Preston. Yes, that is part of it. After the war, I was tired of pretending. Tired of acting like I had not seen the things I had seen, done the things I had done. Out here, I do not have to pretend anymore." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, following a trail that wound through towering pines and across clear streams. Around midday, they stopped to rest and eat the food Yates had packed. They sat on a fallen log overlooking a valley filled with wildflowers, the mountains rising purple and majestic in the distance. "It is beautiful," Delilah said softly. "It is," Yates agreed. "Sometimes I come out here just to look at it, to remind myself that there is still beauty in the world." She looked at him, this large, scarred man who spoke of beauty and dancing, who had saved her without hesitation and asked for nothing in return. "You are not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "I do not know. Someone more rough, I suppose, more crude. But you are gentle in your way, thoughtful." Yates looked uncomfortable with the compliment. "I am just a man, Miss Preston. Nothing special about that. I disagree, but I will not argue with you." They continued on after lunch, and by late afternoon, Delilah could see smoke rising from chimneys in the distance. Coloma spread out before them, a collection of rough buildings clustered along a river, surrounded by mining operations and tents. "Your uncle's boarding house is on the north edge of town," Yates said. "The white building with the green shutters." Delilah felt a sudden tightness in her chest. In a few minutes, they would reach the boarding house and Yates would leave, returning to his mountain cabin. The thought bothered her more than it should have. "Will you come in?" she asked. "Let me introduce you to my uncle, at least. Perhaps he can offer you a hot meal as thanks for bringing me safely." Yates hesitated. "I should head back before dark, please. It would mean a great deal to me." Finally, he nodded. All right, but just for a short while. The boarding house was larger than Delilah had expected, a two-story structure with a wide porch and multiple windows. A sign above the door read Preston's Rooms and Meals. Yates tied the animals to the hitching post, and Delilah climbed the steps, her heart pounding. The door opened before she could knock, and a large man with graying hair and kind eyes appeared. "Can I help you?" he asked, then stopped, looking at her more closely. "Delilah, little Delilah." "Hello, Uncle Thomas." Thomas Preston let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into a crushing hug. "I cannot believe it. We have been expecting you for weeks. Come in, come in." He noticed Yates standing behind her. "And who is this?" "This is Yates Langford. He saved me from some dangerous men on the trail and escorted me safely here." Thomas's expression grew serious. He extended his hand to Yates. "Then I owe you a debt I can never repay. Please come inside. You must stay for supper at the very least." The interior of the boarding house was warm and welcoming, with a large common room where several miners sat playing cards and smoking pipes. Thomas led them through to the kitchen, where a plump woman with flour on her hands turned from her cooking. "Martha, look who has arrived. My niece Delilah." Martha Preston rushed over to embrace her, then immediately began fussing over her appearance. "You poor dear, you look exhausted, and so thin. We need to get some meat on your bones. Thomas, draw a bath. Delilah, you go get cleaned up and we will have a proper supper ready when you come down." "But what about Mr. Langford?" Delilah protested. "He can wash up in the men's room," Martha said practically. "Thomas will show him. Now go on, shoo." An hour later, Delilah came down the stairs feeling like a new person. Martha had provided her with a dress that actually fit properly, blue calico with white trim, and Delilah had washed her hair and pinned it up. She felt almost pretty for the first time in months. The common room had filled with boarders, and Martha was serving supper family style at a long table. Delilah saw Yates sitting near one end, his hair still damp from washing, and something in her chest tightened at the sight of him. He had cleaned up well, his beard trimmed and his shirt changed to a clean one Thomas must have provided. He looked up as she entered, and his eyes widened slightly. "Miss Preston," he said, standing. "You look well." "Thank you. So do you." Supper was a lively affair, with miners sharing stories of their day and Martha making sure everyone had plenty to eat. Yates sat quietly, listening more than talking, but Delilah noticed several people trying to draw him into conversation. He answered politely but without much detail, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. After the meal, Thomas pulled Yates aside, and Delilah watched as her uncle pressed something into the mountain man's hand. Yates tried to refuse, but Thomas was insistent. Finally, Yates nodded and pocketed whatever it was. As the evening wore on, people began to drift away to their rooms or out to the town's saloons. Martha showed Delilah to a small room on the second floor, cozy and clean with a real bed and a window overlooking the street. "You can start helping in the kitchen tomorrow," Martha said. "But tonight you rest. You have had a long journey." Delilah hugged her aunt. "Thank you for taking me in." "You are family, dear. We are happy to have you." When Martha left, Delilah went to the window. Below, she could see Yates standing by his horse, preparing to leave. Without thinking, she hurried down the stairs and out the front door. "Mr. Langford," he turned, his hand on the saddle. "Miss Preston, is something wrong?" "No, I just wanted to say goodbye properly, and to thank you again." "You already thanked me." "I know, but it does not seem like enough. You saved my life." Yates shook his head. "I did what anyone should have done, but no one else did. You did." She stepped closer, suddenly not wanting him to leave. "Will I see you again?" He looked at her for a long moment, and something flickered in his eyes. "I come to town for supplies once a month. I suppose we might run into each other. I would like that. So would I, Miss Preston. He mounted his horse, the big animal shifting under his weight. Take care of yourself. You too. She watched him ride away into the growing darkness, and even after he disappeared from sight, she stood there, feeling strangely bereft. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Delilah fell easily into the rhythm of the boarding house, helping Martha with cooking and cleaning, serving meals to the miners, and managing the books when Thomas was too busy. The work was hard but satisfying, and her aunt and uncle treated her with genuine affection. But every day she found herself thinking about Yates, wondering what he was doing in his mountain cabin, if he was safe, if he ever thought about her. She told herself she was being foolish, that they had spent less than 24 hours together, but her heart did not listen to reason. 4 weeks after her arrival, Thomas mentioned that he needed to send someone to collect a supply order from a trapper who lived in the mountains. Usually I go myself, he said, but my back has been bothering me something fierce. I can go, Delilah volunteered immediately. Martha frowned. Those trails are not safe for a woman alone. I made it here by myself, did I not? Barely, from what Mr. Langford told us. You were lucky he came along when he did. Then I will be careful. Besides, someone needs to go, and if Uncle Thomas's back is hurting, it should not be him. After much discussion, they agreed to let her go, with the understanding that she would take Thomas's rifle, and that if anything seemed dangerous, she would turn back immediately. Delilah set out the next morning with directions to the trapper's cabin written on a piece of paper. But halfway there, she found herself taking a different trail, one that led north toward where she thought Yates's cabin might be. She told herself she just wanted to make sure he was all right, that it was on her way regardless, but deep down she knew the truth. She wanted to see him again. Finding the cabin was easier than she expected. She simply followed the stream Yates had mentioned, and there it was, nestled among the pines exactly as she remembered. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the black horse grazed in the corral. Delilah dismounted and approached the door, her heart pounding. Before she could knock, it swung open, and Yates stood there, his eyes wide with surprise. "Miss Preston, what are you doing here?" "I had to collect supplies from a trapper, and I thought I would stop by to say hello." "I hope that is all right." For a moment he just stared at her. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming his entire appearance. "It is more than all right. Come in." Inside, the cabin looked exactly as it had before, tidy and organized. But now there were fresh wildflowers in a jar on the table, and she wondered if he had picked them himself. "I was just making lunch," Yates said. "Nothing fancy, but you are welcome to share it." They ate together, talking easily about everything and nothing. Delilah told him about life at the boarding house, about the colorful characters who stayed there, and the daily challenges of feeding so many hungry miners. Yates told her about tracking a mountain lion that had been threatening his horse, about the books he was reading, about the simple pleasures of his solitary life. "You truly not miss people?" she asked. "I used to tell myself I did not," he admitted. "But lately I find myself feeling lonely more often, especially in the evenings when the sun sets and the cabin feels very empty. I am sorry, that must be difficult. It was my choice. I cannot complain about it." He looked at her across the table. "But I will admit, it is nice having company right now. It is nice having your company." Delilah felt warmth spread through her chest. "I enjoy your company too." After lunch, Yates insisted on accompanying her to the trapper's cabin to collect the supplies. "You should not be traveling alone," he said. "And besides, I know the man you are looking for. His trails can be tricky to follow." They rode together through the afternoon, and Delilah found herself acutely aware of Yates beside her. The way he sat his horse with easy confidence, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings for danger, the way he would occasionally point out something interesting, a deer track, an eagle's nest, a patch of wild strawberries. The trapper was an ancient man named Josiah, who seemed delighted to have visitors. He pressed them to stay for coffee, and they sat in his cluttered cabin listening to his stories of the old days when he had trapped beaver all through these mountains. When they finally left, loaded down with furs and dried meat, the sun was already sinking toward the horizon. "You should stay at my cabin tonight," Yates said. "It is too dangerous to travel in the dark, and you are closer to my place than to town." Delilah knew she should refuse, knew it was improper, but she found herself nodding. "All right, thank you." They reached his cabin as the last light faded from the sky. Yates built up the fire while Delilah unpacked the supplies they had collected. Then he made dinner, moving around the kitchen with practiced ease. They ate by firelight, the cabin warm and cozy around them. "I am glad you came today," Yates said as they finished eating. "So am I. Delilah, can I ask you something?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips made her shiver. "Of course." "Why did you really come here? The trapper's cabin is not on the way from town. You went out of your way to visit me." She could have lied, could have made up some excuse, but the way he was looking at her, open and vulnerable, made her want to be honest. "Because I wanted to see you again. Because I have been thinking about you every day since you brought me to Coloma. Because when you rode away that night, I felt like something important was leaving with you." Yates was quiet for a long time. Then he stood and walked to the fireplace, staring into the flames. "I have been thinking about you too," he said. "Every day, every night. I told myself I was being a fool, that you were too young, too good for someone like me, but I could not stop thinking about you." Delilah rose and crossed to stand beside him. "You are not too old for me. You are not too anything for me." He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Delilah, I am a broken man. The war broke something inside me, something I do not know how to fix. I came to these mountains to hide from the world, from people, from everything I did and saw. I do not know if I am capable of being what someone like you deserves." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough texture of his beard beneath her palm. "I am not asking you to be anything other than who you are. I like who you are, Yates. I like your kindness and your strength. I like the way you talk about beauty and dancing. I like that you saved me without hesitation. I like everything about you. You barely know me. Then let me know you better. Spend time with me. Come to town more often. We can figure this out together." He covered her hand with his calloused fingers warm and strong. "What if I disappoint you? What if I am not capable of giving you what you need?" "What if you are?" she countered. "What if we could make each other happy? Is that not worth the risk?" Yates pulled her closer, his arms coming around her waist. She felt small against his chest, enveloped by his warmth and strength. "You are braver than I am," he murmured against her hair, "or maybe I just know what I want." He pulled back enough to look at her face. "And what is that?" "You," she said simply. "I want you." He kissed her then, gentle at first, almost tentative, as if he was afraid she might break. But when she pressed closer, her arms going around his neck, the kiss deepened, becoming something fierce and urgent. His hands moved to her back, holding her against him, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I have not felt this way in so long," he said. "I had forgotten what it was like to want something, to want someone." "Neither have I," Delilah admitted. "I thought I would live my whole life alone, that no one would ever want me, but you make me feel different. You make me feel seen." They stood there in the firelight, holding each other, and Delilah knew with absolute certainty that her life had just changed forever. That night, Yates gave her the bed again, but before she lay down, she turned to him. "Will you teach me to dance?" He looked surprised. "Now, why not?" "You said everyone should get to dance. I want to know what it feels like." A slow smile spread across his face. "I do not have any music. We do not need music, just show me." Yates crossed to her and took her hand, placing her other hand on his shoulder. "Dancing is about trust," he said softly. "You have to trust your partner to lead to keep you safe. Can you trust me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. He began to move, slowly at first, just simple steps back and forth. But then he began to turn, guiding her around the small cabin, and Delilah found herself following his lead, her body moving with his in a way that felt natural and right. He held her close but not too tight, his hand warm on her back, his other hand clasping hers gently. "You are a natural," he murmured. "I have a good teacher." They danced until the fire burned low, until Delilah's feet were tired and her heart was full. When they finally stopped, she looked up at him and saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Love, she realized. He was falling in love with her, just as she was falling in love with him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for asking me to dance. Thank you for saying yes." She stood on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet, then went to bed with a smile on her face. In the morning, Yates accompanied her back to Coloma. When they reached the boarding house, he helped her unload the supplies, and Thomas came out to greet them. "Mr. Langford, good to see you again. Will you stay for breakfast? I appreciate the offer, but I should head back." Thomas nodded, then looked between Yates and Delilah with shrewd eyes. "You know, Mr. Langford, we could use a hand around here from time to time. Heavy lifting, repairs, that sort of thing. I would be willing to pay for your help if you were interested." Yates glanced at Delilah, and she saw the corner of his mouth quirk up. "I might be interested in that. I could come by once a week, see what needs doing." "Excellent. How about Saturdays?" "We do a big supper that night, and you could stay over in one of the rooms, head back to your cabin Sunday morning." "That sounds reasonable." Delilah tried to contain her smile. Once a week was not much, but it was better than once a month. It was a start. True to his word, Yates came the following Saturday. He spent the day helping Thomas repair a section of the porch and fixing a leak in the roof. Delilah watched him work whenever she could, admiring the play of muscles beneath his shirt, the confident way he handled tools and timber. That evening, after supper, several of the miners pulled out fiddles and began to play. Impromptu dances were common at the boarding house on Saturday nights, and soon the common room was filled with music and laughter. Delilah stood near the kitchen, watching the dancers and remembering the night Yates had taught her to move in his cabin. Then she felt a presence beside her and looked up to find him standing there, his hand extended. "Would you like to dance, Miss Preston?" Her heart soared. "I would love to, Mr. Langford." He led her onto the floor, and suddenly everyone was watching. Delilah felt self-conscious at first, but then Yates pulled her close and began to move, and everything else faded away. They danced as if no one else was in the room, as if it was just the two of them in his cabin by the firelight. "You are getting good at this," he murmured. "I have been practicing." "By yourself," she laughed. "I do not have much choice. You are the only one who ever asks me." His arms tightened around her. "Then I will have to ask you more often." They danced through 3 songs, and when the musicians finally took a break, Thomas approached them with a knowing smile. "You two make a fine couple out there." Delilah blushed, but Yates did not look embarrassed. "Thank you, sir. Martha and I are heading to bed. Delilah, do not stay up too late. Sundays we serve breakfast early." When they were alone, or as alone as they could be with a few remaining miners playing cards in the corner, Yates took Delilah's hand. Walk with me." They stepped out onto the porch, where the cool night air was a relief after the warmth of the crowded room. The street was quiet, most of the town already asleep. "I have been thinking," Yates said, "about what you said at my cabin, about us figuring this out together." "Yes, I want to try. I want to see where this goes between us, but I need you to understand something." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I am not an easy man to love. I have nightmares sometimes, bad ones from the war. I get moody and withdrawn. I am not used to having someone else to consider, and I will probably make mistakes. But I promise you this, I will always be honest with you. I will always do my best to be worthy of your affection, and I will never hurt you, not intentionally." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "That is all I can ask for, and I promise you the same. I will be patient with you and I will be honest with you. We will learn together." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. "You are the best thing that has happened to me in longer than I can remember." "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me," she replied. They kissed under the stars, and Delilah felt something settle in her chest, something warm and certain. This was right. He was right. The weeks turned into months, and their relationship deepened. Yates came to town every Saturday without fail, working around the boarding house during the day and dancing with Delilah in the evening. He began to open up to her about his past, about the battles he had fought and the friends he had lost. She listened without judgment, simply holding his hand and letting him know she was there. In turn, she told him about her childhood, about feeling like an outsider in her own town, about the loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long. Yates made her feel beautiful and wanted in a way she had never experienced before. One Saturday in late summer, Yates arrived earlier than usual. He found Delilah in the kitchen, helping Martha prepare pies for supper. "Can you spare her for a few hours?" he asked Martha. "I want to show her something." Martha waved them away with a smile. "Go on, you two, I can manage here." Yates led Delilah to his horse and helped her mount in front of him, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. They rode out of town and up into the mountains, following trails Delilah had never seen before. Finally, they emerged into a meadow filled with wildflowers, the mountains rising purple and gold in the distance. "This is my favorite place," Yates said as he helped her down. "I come here when I need to think or when the world feels too heavy." "It is beautiful," Delilah breathed. They sat together in the grass, and Yates pulled something from his pocket. It was a small wooden box, intricately carved with flowers and vines. "I made this for you," he said, handing it to her. "I am not much of a craftsman, but I did my best." Delilah opened the box to find a simple silver ring inside, the band engraved with tiny flowers. She looked up at Yates, her heart racing. "Delilah Preston, I know we have only known each other a few months. I know that by society's standards we should wait longer, but I also know that I love you. I love your strength and your kindness. I love the way you laugh and the way you dance. I love that you see me, the real me, and you do not turn away. I do not have much to offer you, just a cabin in the mountains and a man who is trying his best to be better. But if you will have me, I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Delilah's face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, deep and passionate, and they fell back into the wildflowers, holding each other close. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you so much." "I love you too," he replied. "More than I ever thought possible." They lay there for a long time, just holding each other and watching the clouds drift across the sky. Finally, Yates spoke again. "We should probably talk about the practical aspects, where we will live, how we will manage things." Delilah had been thinking about this. I do not want to leave my aunt and uncle without help. They depend on me now, but I also want to be with you. What if we split our time? Yates suggested. We could live at the boarding house during the week where you can help them and spend weekends at the cabin. Or we could do it the other way around, whatever works best. You would do that. Leave your cabin for me, Delilah. I would do anything for you. The cabin is just a place. You are my home now. She kissed him again, overwhelmed by the depth of her feelings for this man who had come into her life so unexpectedly. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the boarding house. Thomas walked Delilah down the stairs to where Yates waited. Looking almost uncomfortable in new clothes, Thomas had insisted on buying him. But when he saw Delilah in her white dress, her hair pinned up with wildflowers, his face transformed with such joy that several of the miners in attendance had to wipe their eyes. Martha had prepared a feast, and the celebration lasted late into the night. When the dancing started, Yates led Delilah onto the floor, and they moved together as if they had been dancing for years instead of months. I used to think I would never have this, Delilah said as they swayed to the music. A husband, a wedding, people celebrating with me. I used to think I did not deserve this, Yates replied, but you make me believe I can be a good man, a man worthy of your love. You are a good man. You always have been. They spent their wedding night in the small room upstairs, and Yates was gentle and patient, showing Delilah what it meant to be loved completely. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and she traced the scars on his chest with her fingers. Tell me about this one, she said, touching a long white line below his ribs. Bayonet at Gettysburg. I was lucky it did not go deeper. And this? She touched a puckered scar on his shoulder. Bullet wound at Antietam. Went clean through, thankfully. She kissed each scar gently. I am so glad you survived. So glad you found your way to these mountains to me. So am I, he murmured, pulling her close. So am I. They fell into a comfortable routine over the following months. During the week, they lived at the boarding house, where Yates helped Thomas with the heavy work, and Delilah continued to cook and clean. On Friday afternoons, they would ride to the cabin and spend 2 glorious days alone together, fishing in the streams, hiking through the forest, and making love by the fire. Delilah had never been happier. Every evening at the boarding house, after supper was cleared away and the miners had drifted off to their various entertainments, Yates would find her and ask her to dance. It did not matter if there was music or not. They would move together in the common room or on the porch, and Delilah would rest her head against his chest and feel his heart beating strong and steady. You know, she said one evening as they danced, I think about how different my life could have been. If those men had not attacked me on the trail, if you had not come along when you did, I might never have met you. I think about that too, Yates admitted. I almost did not help that day. I almost kept walking, told myself it was not my business. But something made me turn back, some instinct I could not ignore. I am grateful I listened to it. So am I. Winter came to the mountains, bringing snow and bitter cold. The cabin became their refuge on weekends, a warm cocoon against the harsh weather outside. Yates taught Delilah how to snowshoe and how to track animals through the snow. She taught him how to play cards and how to braid his hair to keep it out of his face while he worked. One Saturday in late January, as they sat by the fire in the cabin, Delilah felt Yates tense beside her. She looked up to find him staring into the flames, his expression distant and pained. "What is wrong?" she asked softly. He did not answer for a long moment. Then, "It is the anniversary of Fredericksburg. That is where I saw the worst of it, where I lost most of my unit. Every year around this time, the memories come back stronger. Delilah moved to sit in his lap, wrapping her arms around him. "Tell me about them, your friends, not how they died, but who they were." So Yates told her about Jacob, who had been a farmer and dreamed of going back to his land. About Samuel, who had a beautiful singing voice and would entertain the troops around the campfire. About Henry, who had been planning to become a doctor after the war. He talked for over an hour, and Delilah just held him, occasionally asking questions but mostly just listening. When he finally fell silent, there were tears on his cheeks. Delilah wiped them away gently. "They would be happy for you," she said. "Happy that you survived, that you found peace and love. How can you be sure? Because that is what people who love you want. They want you to be happy, to live a full life. Honoring their memory does not mean suffering forever. It means living well, living the life they did not get to have." Yates held her tighter. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for understanding." That night, they made love with a desperate intensity, clinging to each other as if to ward off the ghosts of the past. And afterward, as Delilah lay in his arms listening to his breathing slow into sleep, she felt grateful for every moment they had together. Spring returned to the mountains, bringing new life and warmth. Delilah had started feeling unwell in the mornings, and Martha noticed before she did. "You are pregnant," her aunt said one morning after Delilah had rushed outside to be sick. Delilah stared at her. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. I had the same symptoms with all three of mine before they were born. You should tell Yates." That Saturday, Delilah broke the news to him at the cabin. She had been nervous about how he would react, but she need not have worried. His face lit up with such pure joy that she found herself laughing through her tears. "A baby," he breathed, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy, Delilah, I am beyond happy. I never thought I would have a family, never thought I deserved one, but you keep giving me gifts I did not dare dream of." He dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead against her stomach. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your father. I promise I am going to do my best by you. I am going to protect you and love you and teach you everything I know about this world. And your mother, she is the most incredible woman you will ever meet. You are so lucky to have her." Delilah ran her fingers through his hair, overcome with emotion. This man, this beautiful, broken, wonderful man, was going to be the father of her child. She could not imagine anything more perfect. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and into summer. Yates became fiercely protective, insisting that Delilah not lift anything heavy or work too hard. He moved them to the boarding house full-time as she grew larger, wanting to be sure she had help nearby if she needed it. Every evening, no matter how tired he was from working, he would ask her to dance. They moved slowly now, carefully, with his hand always supporting her back. Other times they just swayed together, barely moving, just holding each other. "I love these moments," Delilah said one night. "Just us and the baby dancing together. So do I. I think this is my favorite time of day." "Not when we are alone at the cabin," he smiled. "That is good too. But there is something special about this, about holding you and knowing our child is right here between us. It makes me feel complete in a way I never have before." The baby came in early September, a long and difficult labor that left Yates pacing the hallway outside their room, wild-eyed with worry. When Martha finally emerged to tell him he had a son, he burst into the room to find Delilah exhausted but beaming, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Meet your son," she said softly. Yates approached slowly, almost reverently. When he looked down at the baby's face, scrunched and red and beautiful, something broke open inside him. He sat on the bed and carefully took the baby into his arms, cradling him as if he was made of glass. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Delilah, he is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names before, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at his son, Yates knew. Matthew, after my best friend from the war, the one who saved my life at Shiloh. He died the next day, and I always wished I could thank him properly. This feels like the right way to honor his memory. Matthew Langford, Delilah said, testing the name. I love it. Little Matthew proved to be a healthy, happy baby. Yates was a devoted father, taking to the role with surprising ease. He would walk the floor with Matthew when he cried at night, sing to him in a low, rumbling voice that somehow always soothed the baby, and spend hours just watching him sleep. I never knew I could love something this much, he told Delilah one night as they watched Matthew sleeping in the cradle Yates had built. It is almost frightening how much I love him, how much I would do to protect him. That is how I feel about both of you, Delilah said, taking his hand. As Matthew grew, so did their family's happiness. They eventually decided to build a larger cabin near Yates's original one, something with room for their growing family and occasional visitors. Yates did most of the work himself, with help from Thomas and some of the miners who had become friends. Every evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Yates would build up the fire and ask Delilah to dance. Sometimes they moved to music only they could hear. Sometimes they just swayed in place. Matthew would watch from his blanket on the floor, gurgling happily. He is going to grow up thinking all married couples dance every evening, Delilah said, laughing. Would that be such a bad thing? Maybe he will find himself a woman who loves to dance as much as his mother does. As much as we both do, she corrected. You love it just as much as I do. I do, he admitted, because it reminds me of the first time I asked you, that night in my old cabin when you told me no one had ever asked you before. I knew then that I wanted to spend the rest of my life asking you to dance. 2 years later, their daughter was born. They named her Clara, after Delilah's mother. She had Yates's blue eyes and Delilah's dark hair, and she was as fierce as her father and as kind as her mother. Matthew, now 3, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle and talk to her in his childish voice, telling her about the squirrels he had seen and the fish Papa had caught. Yates watched them with such tenderness that Delilah often found herself getting misty-eyed. You are a wonderful father, she told him one evening as they danced, Clara sleeping in a sling against Delilah's chest and Matthew already in bed. I learned from the best, he replied. You are an incredible mother. Our children are so lucky to have you. We are all lucky to have each other. Life in the mountains was not always easy. There were harsh winters and difficult times when supplies ran low. There were illnesses and injuries, close calls with wildlife and dangerous weather. But through it all, they had each other. As the children grew, Yates taught them about the wilderness, how to track and hunt, how to read the weather and find their way home. Delilah taught them to read and write, to cook and clean, to treat others with kindness and respect. And every evening, without fail, the children would watch their parents dance by the fire. When Matthew turned 10, he asked his father, "Why do you and Mama dance every night?" Yates looked at his son, this boy who was already showing signs of the man he would become. "Because your mother had never danced before we met. No one had ever asked her, and I decided that I would ask her every evening for the rest of our lives, so she would never feel that loneliness again. That is very romantic, Papa. Your mother deserves romance. She deserves everything good in this world." Matthew thought about that for a moment. "When I grow up, I want to find someone I can dance with every night." "I hope you do, son. I hope you do." The years passed, bringing changes and challenges. Thomas and Martha grew older and eventually passed away, leaving the boarding house to Delilah. She and Yates decided to sell it, using the money to expand their homestead and secure their children's future. Matthew grew into a strong young man, much like his father but with more education and less darkness in his past. He fell in love with a miner's daughter and married her in the same meadow where Yates had proposed to Delilah. Clara became a teacher, traveling to small mining camps and frontier towns to educate children who would otherwise have no schooling. Yates's hair turned gray, and lines deepened around his eyes. But he remained strong and vital, still working the land and hunting in the mountains he loved. Delilah's face showed the passage of time as well, but she was still beautiful to him, still the woman who had changed his entire world. One evening, 30 years after they had met on that mountain trail, Yates built up the fire as he always did and turned to his wife. His movements were slower now, his body bearing the aches of age and old injuries, but his eyes were as clear and loving as ever. "Delilah," he said, extending his hand. "Would you dance with me?" She smiled, the same radiant smile that had captured his heart 3 decades ago. "I would love to, Yates." They moved together in the firelight, slower than they used to but no less in love. Their children had given them 6 grandchildren, all of whom loved to visit the mountain homestead and hear stories of how their grandparents had met. "You remember that first night?" Delilah asked softly. "When you told me you liked to dance, and I told you no one had ever asked me. I remember everything about that night. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met. Coming to these mountains alone, trusting a stranger, speaking your truth without shame. I remember thinking you were the kindest man I had ever met, saving me without hesitation, offering shelter without expecting anything in return, listening to my pain without judgment." They swayed together, their bodies fitting perfectly after so many years of practice. "I love you," Yates murmured. "I have loved you every day since that moment on the trail when I saw those men threatening you and knew I would do anything to keep you safe. I love you too. You gave me everything I never dared to hope for. A home, a family, a partner who sees me and chooses me every single day. And dancing," he added with a smile. "Cannot forget the dancing." She laughed, the sound still as bright and joyful as it had been when she was 22. "And dancing. Every evening by the fire, just like you promised." They danced until the fire burned low and the stars filled the sky outside their window. When they finally stopped, Yates kissed her forehead and led her to their bed, where they curled together as they had every night for 30 years. "Thank you," Delilah whispered in the darkness, "for asking me to dance." "Thank you for saying yes," Yates replied, "every time." As they drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, the fire crackled softly in the hearth, and outside the mountains stood silent and eternal, witnesses to a love story that had begun with a simple question, and a woman who had finally found someone to dance with. The seasons continued to turn in the mountains, marking time with snow and wildflowers, autumn leaves and spring rain. Matthew and his wife had taken over much of the physical work of maintaining the homestead, building their own cabin nearby so they could help as Yates and Delilah aged. Clara visited regularly, bringing her husband and children to spend weeks at a time in the mountain air. Yates still rose before dawn, though he moved more stiffly now. His hands, once so strong and sure, had developed a slight tremor that frustrated him. But he could still build a fire, still help with repairs, still ride his horse through the trails he knew by heart. Delilah spent her days tending the garden, teaching her grandchildren to cook, and writing letters to friends they had made over the years. Her hair had gone completely white, but her eyes remained bright and sharp, missing nothing. And every evening, without fail, Yates would build up the fire and turn to his wife with that same question. "Delilah, would you dance with me?" And every evening she would smile and take his hand. One spring evening, as the aspens were beginning to leaf out and the streams ran high with snowmelt, their entire family gathered at the homestead. Matthew and his wife had brought their 4 children. Clara had arrived with her husband and their 2 daughters. The cabin was crowded and noisy in the best possible way, filled with laughter and children's voices. After supper, as the adults sat around the fire and the children played on the floor, Yates stood and extended his hand to Delilah. The room fell silent, everyone watching this ritual they had witnessed countless times. "Grandma," said Matthew's oldest daughter, a precocious 8-year-old named Rose, "why does Grandpa ask you to dance every night?" Delilah looked at her granddaughter, then at her husband, then at all the faces watching them with love and curiosity. "Because when I was young, I went to dances and stood against the wall, hoping someone would ask me. No one ever did. I felt invisible, like I did not matter. Your grandfather changed that. He saw me, really saw me, and he decided I would never feel that way again. So he asks me every evening, and I say yes every evening, and we dance. It is our way of telling each other that we still see each other, that we still choose each other, that after all these years we are still here together." "That is beautiful," Rose breathed. "It is," Clara agreed, wiping her eyes. Yates pulled Delilah to her feet and they began to move. Their grandchildren watched, transfixed, as these 2 old people swayed together with a grace that defied their age. Matthew's youngest son began to hum a tune, and soon others joined in, creating music for the dancers. "I love our family," Delilah whispered to Yates. "So do I. We built something good here, you and I, something that will last long after we are gone. Do you have any regrets, looking back on everything?" Yates thought about that as they turned slowly in the firelight. "Only one. I wish I had found you sooner. I wish we had more time. We have had 33 years. That is more than many people get. I would take 100 more if I could." She smiled against his chest. "So would I, but I am grateful for what we have. Every day, every dance, every moment, I am grateful for all of it." Later, after the family had gone to bed in various corners of the cabin and in the other buildings on the homestead, Yates and Delilah lay together in their room, listening to the sounds of the forest outside their window. "Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me?" Delilah asked. "Step away from her. I was talking to those men who were threatening you." "And do you remember the first thing you said directly to me? Are you hurt?" She turned to face him in the darkness. "You were worried about me before you even knew my name. That is who you are, Yates. Someone who protects, who cares, who shows up when people need help. That is what I fell in love with. I fell in love with your courage, your honesty, the way you trusted me even when you had no reason to, the way you saw past my scars and my brokenness to the man underneath. You were never broken. You were wounded but not broken. There is a difference." He kissed her soft and tender. "Thank you for healing me. Thank you for giving me a reason to dance." As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, Yates began to slow down more noticeably. He tired easily and spent more time sitting in his chair by the fire. But every evening he still asked Delilah to dance, even if they barely moved, even if they just swayed in place with his arms around her. One October evening, with the aspens blazing gold outside their window and the air crisp with the promise of winter, Yates built up the fire as he always did. But when he turned to ask Delilah to dance, he found himself struggling for breath. She was at his side immediately, helping him into his chair. "Should I get Matthew?" "No," he managed. "Just sit with me." She pulled her own chair close to his, taking his hand in hers. They sat together watching the flames, and Delilah felt fear clench her heart. She knew what this meant, knew that their time was drawing to a close. "Delilah," Yates said, his voice strained, "I need to tell you something. You can tell me anything. These have been the best years of my life. Every single day with you has been a gift. You took a man who was hiding from the world and taught him how to live again, how to love again. I cannot imagine what my life would have been without you, and I am grateful I never had to find out. Tears streamed down her face. Yates, please. You are going to be fine. We will get through this. Maybe. But in case I do not, I need you to know you were everything. You are everything. Marrying you, building this life with you, watching our children and grandchildren grow, it was all more than I deserved, more than I dared hope for. You deserve every happiness, she insisted. You are a good man, the best man I have ever known. He squeezed her hand weakly. Dance with me, Delilah, one more time. You need to rest. I need to dance with my wife. So she helped him to his feet, supporting most of his weight, and they swayed together in the firelight. His breathing was labored, his movements slow, but his arms were still around her, and that was all that mattered. I love you, he whispered. I will always love you. I love you too, forever and always. They stood there, barely moving, just holding each other. And in that moment, Delilah was 22 again, dancing in a mountain cabin with a stranger who had saved her life. In that moment, they were newly married, swaying together at their wedding while their friends celebrated. In that moment, they were young parents moving gently with their baby between them. They were every age, every version of themselves, all at once. When Yates's breathing eased and some color returned to his face, Delilah helped him back to his chair. She called for Matthew then, and their son fetched the doctor from the nearest town. The doctor confirmed what Delilah already knew. Yates's heart was failing. He might have days or weeks, or if they were very lucky, months. True to his nature, Yates faced this news with calm acceptance. I have lived a full life, he told his children when they gathered around him. I have been loved and I have loved in return. I have no complaints. Papa, you cannot leave us, Clara said through her tears. I do not want to, sweetheart, but none of us get to choose when our time comes. What we can choose is how we spend the time we have. And I choose to spend it with all of you, with your mother, right here in this place that has been my home. The weeks that followed were bittersweet. Yates grew weaker, spending most of his days in bed or sitting by the fire. But the cabin was always full of family, children and grandchildren coming to visit, to hear his stories, to tell him about their lives. And every evening, Delilah would help him to his feet, and they would dance. Sometimes it was just a few steps, sometimes they only swayed in place. But they danced, they always danced. You do not have to do this, Yates told her one evening when he could barely stand. You have nothing left to prove. I am not trying to prove anything, she replied. I am dancing with my husband. That is all I have ever wanted to do. The first snow fell in November, dusting the mountains white. Yates watched it from his bed, Delilah sitting beside him holding his hand. Their grandchildren were building a snowman outside, their laughter drifting through the window. It is beautiful, Yates said. All of it. The snow, the mountains, our family. Thank you for giving me this, Delilah. Thank you for taking a chance on a broken mountain man who did not know how to live anymore. You were never broken, she said fiercely. You were healing, and you let me be part of that healing. Thank you for trusting me with your heart. That evening, when the sun set behind the mountains and the first stars appeared, Yates looked at his wife. Delilah, would you dance with me? She could see how much effort it took for him to even ask. Are you sure? I am sure. One more dance, my love. So she helped him from the bed, supporting his weight entirely now, and they moved together in the candlelight. His children and grandchildren had gathered outside the room, watching through the partially open door as these two people who had loved each other for 33 years danced for the last time. I have to tell you something, Yates murmured against her hair. A secret I have been keeping. What is that? That first day when I saved you from those men. It was not just because it was the right thing to do. It was because the moment I saw you, something in my chest tightened. I looked at you, frightened and brave and alone, and I thought, she is the one. I did not understand it then, but I knew. Somewhere deep inside, I knew you were going to change my life. Delilah was crying openly now. I knew too, that night in your cabin when you told me you liked to dance. I fell a little bit in love with you right then. Only a little bit. All the way, she admitted. I fell all the way in love with you, and I never looked back. They swayed together, barely moving, just existing in the same space, breathing the same air, hearts beating in sync. "Thank you for asking me to dance," Delilah whispered. "Every evening for 33 years. Thank you for seeing me." "Thank you for saying yes," Yates replied. "Thank you for loving me." They stood there for a long time, holding each other, dancing their last dance. And when Yates's legs finally gave out, Matthew and his son were there to help get him back to bed. Delilah climbed in beside her husband, something she had done thousands of times before, and curled against his side. His arm came around her, still strong enough to hold her close. "I love you," he said, "always and forever." "I love you too," she replied, "in this life and the next." Yates Langford passed away peacefully just before dawn, surrounded by his family, with his wife's hand in his and the sound of the mountain wind singing through the pines outside. He was 70 years old and had lived a life full of love and purpose. The grief was overwhelming at first. Delilah moved through the days in a fog, performing tasks by rote, unable to fully accept that he was gone. Every evening, as the sun set, she would find herself waiting for him to ask her to dance, and the silence where his voice should have been was devastating. But slowly, with the support of her children and grandchildren, she began to heal. She took comfort in her memories, in the life they had built together, in the family that was his legacy. One evening in spring, nearly a year after Yates's death, Delilah sat by the fire in the cabin they had shared. Matthew had suggested she move in with his family, but she had refused. This was her home, hers and Yates's, and she was not ready to leave it. As the sun set, Rose, her oldest granddaughter, appeared at her side. The girl was 13 now, on the cusp of womanhood, and she had her grandfather's blue eyes. "Grandma," Rose said softly, "would you teach me to dance?" Delilah looked at her granddaughter in surprise. "You want to learn to dance?" "I want to learn to dance the way you and Grandpa did, so that someday when I meet someone special, I can dance with them like that, so I can have what you had." Tears filled Delilah's eyes, but they were not entirely sad. "I would be honored to teach you." She stood and took Rose's hand, showing her how to position her feet, how to hold herself. "Dancing is about trust," she said, echoing the words Yates had spoken to her so many years ago. "You have to trust your partner to lead, to keep you safe." They moved together around the cabin, slowly at first, then with growing confidence. As they danced, Delilah could feel Yates's presence, could almost hear his voice encouraging her, telling her she was doing beautifully. "Thank you, Grandma," Rose said when they finally stopped. "That was wonderful. Thank you for asking. Your grandfather would have been so proud of you." After Rose left, Delilah stood alone by the fire. She looked at the empty space where Yates used to stand, where he had stood every evening for 33 years, and she whispered, "I miss you. I miss you every single day." But she did not feel alone. The cabin was full of memories, good ones, joyful ones. The walls held the echoes of their laughter, their conversations, their love. And every evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Delilah could swear she felt his arms around her, could hear his voice asking that same question. "Would you dance with me?" And in her heart, she always answered yes. Delilah lived for another 12 years, long enough to see her grandchildren grow up and start families of their own, long enough to hold her first great-grandchild. She remained in the cabin she had shared with Yates, finding peace in the mountains he had loved so much. She passed away on a spring morning, sitting in her chair by the fire. Matthew found her there, a smile on her face, her hands folded peacefully in her lap. On the table beside her was a letter addressed to her family. "My dearest children and grandchildren," it read. "If you are reading this, then I have gone to join your father and grandfather. Do not be sad for me. I have lived a long and happy life, filled with more love than I ever dreamed possible. Your grandfather once told me that everyone should get to dance, that everyone should know what that feels like. I want you to remember that. Find someone who sees you, really sees you, and hold on to them. Dance with them, laugh with them, build a life with them. And when the hard times come, and they will come, remember that love is worth fighting for. I am leaving you the cabin and the land. Take care of it as your grandfather and I did. Teach your children to respect these mountains, to find peace in the wilderness, to appreciate the simple beauty of a sunrise or a snowfall, and every now and then build up the fire and dance. Remember us, and know that we loved you with every fiber of our being. All my love, always and forever, Delilah Langford." They buried her next to Yates on a hillside overlooking the valley, beneath the aspens he had loved. The entire family gathered for the service, 3 generations united in grief and love. As the sun set after the burial, Rose, now a married woman with children of her own, stood with her husband by the fire in the cabin. She looked at him and smiled. "Would you dance with me?" she asked. He took her hand without hesitation. "Always." And as they moved together in the firelight, the spirits of Yates and Delilah seemed to dance alongside them, forever young, forever in love, forever asking and forever saying yes. The cabin remained in the family for generations, each new owner maintaining it with care and reverence. And the story of Yates and Delilah became legend in those mountains, the tale of a mountain man and a woman who had never danced, who found each other against all odds and built a love that transcended time and death. Travelers passing through would sometimes stop at the old cabin, now preserved as a landmark, and locals would tell them the story. About the woman who stood against walls at dances, invisible and unwanted. About the man who saw her and decided she would never feel that way again. About 33 years of evening dances by the fire, a promise kept every single day. And on quiet evenings, when the wind moved through the pines and the fire burned low, some swore they could hear music drifting through the cabin and see 2 shadows swaying together in an eternal dance. The story of Yates and Delilah reminded people that true love exists, that it is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth choosing every single day. It reminded them that the simplest gestures, a hand extended, an invitation to dance, could change everything. It reminded them that seeing someone, really seeing them, was perhaps the greatest gift one person could give another. And so the legend lived on, passed down through generations, inspiring countless others to ask that simple question, to take that chance, to dance by the fire with someone they loved. Because in the end, that was all that mattered. Not wealth or status or grand gestures, but the quiet moments of connection, the daily choices to show up and choose love, the sacred ritual of asking and answering, of moving together through life's dance. In the mountains of California, where the aspens still turn gold in autumn and the streams still run high with spring snowmelt, the cabin stands as a testament to their love. And every evening as the sun sets behind the peaks and the first stars appear, the spirit of a question echoes through the pines, carried on the wind like a promise, like a prayer, like the beginning of forever. Would you dance with me?